Hello, I'm Josiah Dykstra, a technical fellow at the US National Security Agency. It is great to be here at RSA. I am more than happy to take questions throughout the presentation and also at the end today. NSA has a mission to prevent and eradicate cyber threats to national security systems. This talk is about them, but it also applies to you and to other groups that I'll describe throughout the talk. In this presentation, I want to describe an approach to helping to protect a very specific kind of user or organization. And the premise is built on two fundamental ideas. One, that users are still being compromised today, even though we've had decades of research and development, lots of technology and usability advances, and a very strong human cybersecurity community. The second premise is that there are some users out there who just won't devote the resources that they probably should to doing the best practices in cybersecurity. So given those two realities, what can we do to protect people? For more than half a century, lots of people, including you and I, have devoted ourselves to protecting users and computers using cryptography and CAPTCHAs and all kinds of other technologies. And some of those things have provided a lot of real, measurable, tangible benefits, reducing risk to those systems and to those people. This is my career too, and I love it, and I think it is very important, even though we haven't achieved the ultimate goals that we all strive for every day. As just one example, there are significant, sometimes even mandatory campaigns at schools and businesses to educate users about cyber threats and risks and ways to protect themselves, right? Countermeasures. And yet, as you see on this screen, the most common passwords rarely change year over year. And the choices that you see here illustrate that lots of users are picking convenience over good security. Now, the takeaway is not, oh, those silly users. That isn't what I want you to take away today. But I want you to take away the reality that security is a burden for lots and lots of people. And it feels more like a loss than a gain when they have to do cumbersome security measures. I also want to give a hat tip to the field of usable security. This is a group, a community that I know and love, have contributed to, and they are doing terrific work to make security more usable. When I use that phrase, I mean the capacity of a system, of a program, to provide the conditions where a user can make a choice and to make that choice safely and effectively and efficiently, and ideally with the user being happy, with high satisfaction. And so the screen, like you see here, where a user is presented an option that says you have an opportunity to make a choice. Software vendors are always trying to make that choice understandable and easy to use to help the user make an informed decision. Now, what I'm going to propose is not contradictory to usable security, at least in my mind. I actually think we need both usable security in many cases, even though it doesn't always seem to be enough just on its own. So what I'm advocating for is what I am calling invisible security. And this is a different kind of paradigm of protection where I mean that it involves little or no user interaction or attention. So even if a user knows that there's an invisible security mechanism on their system, they're absolved from action. Maybe it means they don't have to do any installation, they don't have to do any configuration, they don't have to do updates or maintenance for that invisible security mechanism, but they also achieve the benefit afforded by that mechanism. And I'm going to tell you about a couple examples here in a second. But again, to an unwitting user, to an average person who doesn't have special considerations, those invisible components are out of sight, they're out of mind. I will acknowledge that this concept is not 100% new. It has been talked about in literature, in research, and the examples that I'm going to give you, I think, point to ideas in invisible security. What I want is to push this idea further along. I want to highlight those existing implementations and why I think they work in an effort to spur more innovation, more technology just like that. So let me give you a couple of examples. The first idea that occurs to me that I think is consistent with what I mean in invisible security are automatic software updates. You probably are well familiar with this kind of technology and have seen these kinds of choices before. Automatic updates give a great example of what I mean by being invisible. It can be enabled by default, like an operating system update, and users have some degree of control when it's necessary or when automatic updates might be dangerous in some environment like a hospital. But the goal is not to make updates usable. It actually is just to automatically do the right thing. Now, this has turned out to be wildly successful, especially in operating systems. But I'll be the first to acknowledge there's perfectly good reasons why certain people or certain businesses or contexts might need more control. What I'm talking about here are the broad swaths of people that don't want to think about security, can't afford the time or the money to do it. They don't want to hire an IT professional to keep their systems updated. Automatic updates is one way that they just don't have to do anything. The software is continually keeping itself up to date. And as we know, software updates are the #1 most important mechanism to keeping people safe. So that's example #1. The second example I want to talk to you about of invisible security is protective DNS. If you're not aware, we are all consumers of the domain name service, whether we acknowledge it or not. When any of us queries google.com or nsa.gov for that matter, behind the scenes, the computer does a whole series of lookups to try and figure out how your computer can talk to the web server somewhere on the internet. So protective DNS is a service that is compatible with that traditional DNS system, except it has an additional feature, which is it has some sense for known bad domain names. And when you query something that might be malicious, it can prevent your browser from resolving that domain by simply redirecting you to a site or not allowing the browser to go there. A lot of malware does the same thing. It needs to resolve command and control domains, for example, and this sort of a system can understand that risk. But again, the user doesn't have to take any explicit action. DNS is often configured for our computers automatically. DHCP in your home or in your business tells your computer what domain name servers to use. And protective DNS allows this to happen transparently for average users. This past year, the NSA actually conducted a protective DNS pilot with several defense industrial base companies. And these companies wouldn't otherwise have probably known about the malicious domains or had any ability to block them. And it turned out to be wildly successful. In the evaluation afterwards, we found that protected DNS probably would have reduced the ability for 92% of malware attacks. And now we're looking at ways that this technology can scale to tens or hundreds of thousands of defense companies that allow all of them to be protected, again, without any explicit interactive action required from the user. So that seems like a really great thing. The third example I want to give of invisible security is facial recognition authentication. Now, I believe that users hate passwords. And as we saw on that earlier slide, they're really terrible at creating them. Facial recognition is one way, a very fast way to authenticate a user when she just looks at the phone, right? Just looks at a device and the face is recognized and the authorized user gets access to that device. Often a phone, now often computers as well. And we see this feature gaining momentum, right? If you're familiar with Apple's Face ID or Android facial recognition, it is more and more commonplace. And I think that shows a lot, the adoption there shows a lot of potential. And again, the user has to do very little to authenticate. They don't have to remember anything. They just have to look at the phone. Now, there are clear trade-offs in this particular example. It is very easy to change a password in most circumstances, and it is nearly impossible to change biometrics, right? You can't change your fingerprint or that face. And if the mechanism breaks down in some way, then we end up in a really tough situation. But again, for average users in many cases, I think facial recognition authentication is a great way to help not only improve security, it's better than no authentication, but also making it very, very usable, nearly invisible for the user. Now, Invisible security is quite a high level idea, and I'll acknowledge that there are lots of considerations when thinking about whether it should be adopted or how to even build more solutions like it. I want to spend a couple of minutes highlighting one of these attributes and invite you to think about others or ask them to me in the Q&A. I've also written a paper that describes these in more sort of explicit detail. But the one I want to talk about is the transfer of trust. I think trust is a keystone component of invisible security, and for that matter, for all cybersecurity. But it's especially important, it seems to me, when users are outsourcing some of their decisions to software on their computer or a third party like a protected DNS provider. Users, I think, might be reluctant. They might not embrace invisible security if they don't trust it. And that will be very, very important. It also means that bad experiences, maybe an automatic update crashed a computer or something else went awry, that is really difficult to overcome, to rebuild that trust after after trust has been breached. Of course, we also have to extend the possibility that the invisible security mechanism itself has to be trustworthy. As a security professional, we're probably thinking, well, how might a malicious actor commandeer this protection mechanism? We always have to be thinking about that. And being able to build resilient, robust services to provide invisible security is very important. I don't want them to become distrusted or mistrusted. The last thing I'll say about the transfer of trust is that because users are giving up control, particularly where the computer seems to be making decisions for them, I have found that users often expect an outsized benefit from that technology, even when it is just a little bit better than a human. We see this, for example, in self-driving cars, where the user expects it to be perfect every time, to make no mistakes. And even if it's 1%, 5% better than what a human would do, the users won't adopt that technology just for small gains. They want it to be amazing. They want it to be nearly perfect. There's a lot of human psychology in that, and a lot of research, I think, to be done about how do we compensate for those decisions. So the transfer of trust, very important one to consider. I will say I think it is working well in the 3 examples that I gave. Lots of users seem to have accepted the trust of automatic updates. There have been notable exceptions. Not every update goes smoothly, but I think users are finding the trade-off to be in their favor. They feel safer, their computers are safer. The cybersecurity community has measured them through research and scientific studies and show that the ecosystem is safer because those things are turned on. Again, lots of other considerations. Transfer of trust, a big important one. I'd like to talk about 3 groups that I think benefit from the adoption of invisible security, 3 specific audiences. The first one I touched on in the pilot that I said NSA did is the defense industrial base. So the DIB is a complex ecosystem of companies. In the United States, it's estimated to contain around 300,000 companies. And if we think about that like a supply chain pyramid, most of those companies are quite small or mid-sized companies. And further than that, each company and their employees introduces risk to national security in some way because of their involvement in the defense ecosystem. I'll also say that small businesses in general, including those in the defense industrial base, have tight profit margins. They're small companies and they need that. So any amount of time or money that they have to put into security cuts away at that tight profit margin already. In some cases, it might risk putting them out of business if they have to devote a lot of time or a lot of money to doing good cybersecurity. So I think for this kind of community, particularly the small, mid-sized companies in this ecosystem, invisible security can help lower their risk while also being respectful of those resource limitations that they experience. The second beneficiary that I think invisible security is very helpful to is healthcare. It's important to realize that for most users, for most people that we think about in the cybersecurity ecosystem, security is not the goal, right? This is pretty evident in healthcare, where health is the primary task. Even though health data is very valuable, right, and quite vulnerable, we have laws to help protect it because it is recognized to be very valuable. Now, a big business, a big hospital, a big university clinic, they might have a dedicated IT staff and a dedicated cybersecurity budget that makes their cybersecurity very good. But there are lots and lots of very small healthcare providers with one doctor or two nurses. And those are the situations where there probably is not dedicated IT staff or budget. And they experience the same risk to health information without the aid that they would get from invisible security. And that's the subset of healthcare that I think would benefit very strongly from this. Again, it's just one component, but if that allows them to better protect your protected health information to make sure it's secure, compliant, it seems like a benefit not only to the provider, but also to us as patients. The third group is kind of a catch-all, but I think it is a benefit to the general public, to everyday people. Lots of people in my family, in my community, and in our world manage their own technology, and they don't have an IT professional or a lot of money or time to sort of consider how to do really, really amazing cybersecurity. But they also have stuff that needs protecting, right? Your bank account, your email, your personal photos and information. So for people that are not on average very tech savvy, how can we still protect them, right? They want to be safe, but they also don't want to be inconvenienced. And this is the group that I think benefits the most from invisible security. And I think it's why we see such great adoption of things like automatic updates and the facial recognition authentication on phones. I want to step aside a second and acknowledge the limits, the limitations of invisible security. First, let me say that invisible security is not about absolving users of all of their responsibility or them giving up complete control. Even if this was wildly successful, users are not going to be magically immune to cyber attacks. If that was true, we would have adopted this a long time ago, I think. By analogy, for example, an automobile has a lot of automatic safety features, dozens, hundreds maybe, but the driver still has to take deliberate action, right? Still has to buckle their safety belt, still has to press the brake pedal in some cases. We're not absolving drivers of all the responsibility, and we can't do the same for cyber either. I think designers of invisible security technologies need to respect that there's an appropriate balance here between the desires for user autonomy where it's appropriate and where that trades off for good or worse security. Another thing I want to understand are what are called mental models, or how a user understands what's happening on their computer inside their own brain. What is their mental model for what is going on? And the area where I would like to see more research in this is about how people feel safe when they see security. It might be possible just to notify a user that perhaps the computer has taken an action, even though the user doesn't have to make any choice or do any intervention. And I see this in some antivirus products that just alert the user that they have been protected. Or some browsers that say, we have limited your access to this website because we know it is malicious. And so that notification might be the right way to let the user know what's happening, that the computer has taken an action, without them still having to understand that this button is the button they should click, or this is the action that they should take. Many of you might be familiar with a concept called visible policing, and this goes into that mental model argument as well. And what visible policing is that the presence of the police or guards or uniformed officers is thought to make people feel feelings of safety. Now, this is actually a different goal than actually being safe, but I think it's important nonetheless that users of their computer not only need to be safe, but they need to feel it. And so that mental model, I think, plays into that a lot. You might also be asking yourself the question on the right, which is, well, if invisible security is so good, why is there so much attention, even evidence, about multi-factor authentication, right? Or two-factor authentication, and the way that that better protects accounts than just having a password. And you might say, well, isn't multi-factor better than just facial recognition, for example? I would like to see more research here. I think this is a great topic for some academic research. It's possible that the second factor can also be more invisible. Instead of requiring the user to put their thumbprint on a fingerprint reader or to press a button that pops up on their phone, what if that second factor could be behavior-based? The way that you type your keystrokes could be the second factor. Continuous authentication is now being built into websites like some banks that continually try to evaluate every few seconds, is it still the user I think it is based on their behavior? And so behavior might offer us a way to have an invisible second factor as well. I think that's kind of exciting. So what comes next? I said that there's already some examples of this. I think there's a lot of work to be done. First is to acknowledge that the disparate sort of technologies that I have highlighted, things like auto updates, protective DNS, that they all fall under an umbrella. Recognizing that, I think, will help push the boundaries a little bit farther than otherwise just having individual disparate sort of research efforts or features that roll out. If we think of them all together, I think it gives us a better picture and a better way to advocate for them. In addition to that, I think there's a lot of technology that will emerge on the horizon relatively soon. I will say I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the next thing is. And so my invitation is for all of us to do more thinking about this. One, though, I think authentication trends will continue to evolve. The same way that we saw an evolution from passwords to biometrics to behavioral analysis, I suspect there will continue to be usable security evolution in authentication. I don't think we've quite hit the end of that yet. Two, I think there's a lot of opportunity for high quality reputation services. These threat reputation services can give us timely, dynamic, and honestly hands-free defenses for new threats as they emerge. So not only do we not have to wait for threat intelligence to come to us very manually or very slowly, but if we can trust and if we can build low false positive reputation services and then have the computer automatically enforce them, that would be a new way for invisible security to help yet another area. The third one, and I am not always the forefront advocate of machine learning, but I think this is one place where machine learning or AI could eventually contribute to invisible security. In particular, machine learning is quite good at anomaly detection. And so if we apply that to user behavior or machine behavior, and the ability to behind the scenes have the computer notice that the machine is acting differently than it did before, we've had that kind of intrusion detection. But I think there's a lot more opportunities on the horizon for those systems to take action, to make decisions, to inform humans about how to better protect their systems. So I actually see a lot of future potential for machine learning in this field. And I'm probably sure I can't envision all the creative ways that people will also go about it. So let's talk for a minute about how to put this idea into action. One, I think it's important to look for opportunities to transition from traditional intrusive cybersecurity to proposals for invisible. It isn't the panacea. It isn't going to solve every problem. I will be the first to acknowledge. But I think we should look for opportunities about where can those trade-offs occur today and where are opportunities to develop them in the future. What new technology could help alleviate some really cumbersome, burdenful tasks that the users have today? and make that more invisible. I don't want you to just take my word for it that this is a good idea. I think metrics and measurements will let you try things out and to measure whether they work or not. I'm a big fan of doing this, where you measure how well the environment is working. What are the security metrics today? How happy are your users with them? And then to make a small change, right? Turn on automatic updates or introduce protected DNS into your environment and do the measurement again and find out, is it better than what you had before for some meaningful metric, right? Do you have less malware propagating on your network after the protected DNS? That's a good way to prove, to show that that mechanism is working. In the long term, I think we need to push the envelope. We need to get ourselves involved as practitioners with the research community. They want to hear our real pain points. And if security is too burdensome, the research community loves those kinds of problems. I've been in the research community for a long time. We're always looking in that regard for problems that people cared about, things that we could really sink our teeth into that aren't just engineering challenges. It's not just we need to code the software this way and the problem will be solved. This is a great area for research because we don't actually know what the solutions will look like. We have some, I think, good examples, the ones that we've talked about here, and going and talking to communities. If we go to the hospital and talk to the staff and say, how much time are you spending on security? Or do observational studies about how many times people use a shared password, we can get a better sense for where the invisible security will have the most impact. And those are the ones we can really focus on sort of moving forward. But even if you're not a researcher, keep your eye out for this kind of technology. When you see it, and people don't always call it under the umbrella that I'm sort of proposing, now hopefully you'll be able to keep in the back of your mind that one benefit of the thing that a vendor is trying to sell you might be, it's a low burden on our users. And we might be able to replace an intrusive, sort of very hands-on choice for users to one that happens more automatically, or alleviate some burden that the users are making the wrong choice or taking too long to make a choice. So I very much look forward to that. So I look forward to your questions now. I will invite you to send them to me at any time. We will have some time here to chat. My email is always open to you. And I look forward to hearing your thoughts about limitations, but especially how we can push this field forward and really how invisible security can help protect users who have little resources, have no time to spare. Thank you.